My name is Carolyn Prince, and I live in Danville, Kentucky, and have all my life. Been in and come back. I graduated of Bay High School in Danville, Kentucky. I attended Fugazi Business School in Lexington on High Street many, many years ago. So, and I'm very much interested in a volume of a lot of history, Black history. And I remember going to Bates School and those wonderful teachers that we had, because the teachers then, they would give you individual attention. So we enjoyed going to Bates High School, and we'd have plays, and we'd have ball games. In the summertime, see, we couldn't go to swimming pools. Only time we got to go to a swimming pool would be in Lexington at Douglas Park. And then at Danville High School, we got, like I said, we get personal attention. We did. All those teachers was wonderful. Well, the textbooks, we had textbooks, but they were used textbooks. They would give us the textbooks when they would finish with them in Danville schools. We'd get the leftover textbooks. And in your textbooks, you'd have Mary and Sally and Susie and all them names in your book, so you scratch them out and put your name in it. And then, I'm going back a little bit. I had a cousin, his name was J.T. Gray, him and Buster Letcher, them. They played football, way before I was going to school. But I said all that, they played football, but they had to use uniforms. Whatever they got through with Danville High School, they sent them to our boys.
Did they change the names on them at all? Or did it say Bate, or did it still say Danville High School?
No, it didn't say Danville High School, just have a number back here.
Okay.
And at that time, Danville High School was down there on the corner of Warner Street and College Street, where Norton Center is. That was Danville High School.
Okay.
At one time. And my grandmother, she was a cook at that school, many years ago. Then they tore that down, they built Norton Center. See, we couldn't even go to Center College. That wasn't even, you wouldn't even think about trying to go to Center College. Only schools we got to go was Kentucky State, and you had business school in Paducah, or you went to Louisville to Madam C.J. Walker, which our grandmother went. Way back in the day, you didn't have to go to Kentucky State but 2 years, and you could be a teacher. And at one time, her grandmother went to Kentucky State and finished, and taught in Junction City. At that time, before I came along to go to school, they had one-room schools, one in Junction and one in the Persimmon Knobs in Boyle County. And her grandmother taught in Junction City, and then she had an aunt that taught up in the Persimmon Knobs, or Wilsonville, I think they call it, Wilsonville, Kentucky, one-room schools. Then later on in years, you had to have more years at Kentucky State to finish. So her grandmother had gotten older. She said, well, it's too old. I'm too old to go back to school. So she went to Madam C.J. Walker's school in Louisville and took up hair and did hair for about 50 years. And then now back to Main Street, wasn't any store up there that I could have got a job, a sales clerk, like in the women's department. They wouldn't hire you for that. They would hire us for janitors and maintenance. That's the only place we could get a job would be in maintenance. Now, I've never been called the N-word to my face, but one time, this always has stuck in my mind, where I would go to Lexington, catch the bus before I was old enough to drive, to go shop. And at that time, you didn't have shopping centers back in the day. So I'd catch a bus, walk downtown and shop. And this always stuck in my mind. I went in one of those big department stores in Lexington, and I just went to the counter and picked up some earrings. And the woman came to me, she said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but we don't serve colored people. So I dropped, and I said, oh, I'm sorry. So I went on out. But that stuck in my mind. And then the hospital, they would hire people, but you're still in kitchen or maintenance. And the only way we would go into the hospital here would be the back door. We had 2 private rooms there and a huge ward. That's the only rooms that we had that we could go to. But we didn't get out of that where we were, with that back door and those 2 rooms and at the ward, we didn't get by with that for years and years. After that, we went back there. It's the only place you can go in through the back. And a lot of times we'd want to go somewhere to eat and stuff. We could go out there to, I think they called it, it was something out there near the railroad. I can't think of it, but you couldn't go inside. You'd have to send somebody there and get it for you. And at the theater, we had to go upstairs to go see the movies in the balcony, and which I liked up in the balcony. But that's the only place we could go anyway. But when you got ready to go into the theater, I paid 10 cents to get into the movies. And the whites on this side, and we was on this side. And we paid on this side a dime to go to a movie. And the white people was over here. They went in that door, I went in that door. Had to go upstairs and sit there, which I didn't mind. I liked up there. But I couldn't go to the bathroom. And as a kid, we go up there on Saturdays. We didn't have nothing else to do. We go up on Saturdays, and they had cowboys on Saturdays. And this is before computers and typewriters came out, you know what I'm saying? And we'd go up there on Saturdays and stay all day long. Well, I had to go to the bathroom, but we could not go to a bathroom. So I had an Aunt Maud that lived down on First Street. And First Street is down there between Main Street and Warner Street. That's where the Constitution Square runs between there. Okay, so I had an Aunt Maud live down on First Street, so when the commercials came on the screen, I'd run down to my aunt's house, go to the bathroom, and get back up there so I wouldn't lose my seat. We could not use the bathroom. The machines, the pop machine and the popcorn machine divided us, you know. You'd come down through the middle, we over here and they over there. But I loved up in the balcony. I liked the balcony. They didn't probably want us to like it. They didn't care whether it liked or not. That's the only place we had to go. A lot of the stores up here, they wouldn't hire you as a sales clerk. I know one or 2 stores did. They would hire high school girls to come and help.
Did that affect their business at all, having African-Americans?
No, it didn't. It didn't. They'd be high school girls going up there after school. No, it didn't affect the business that I know of. They did that for years. One was on 3rd Street and the other was on 4th Street, and they would hire girls, African-American girls. One. And up to the hub, my mother told me, I got notes here and I forgot to pull them out, but my mother told me that when she came along, you couldn't even try clothes on at the hub. They could go by, but they wouldn't hire them to work, only in maintenance, like I told you. But then she said we couldn't try clothes on, or hats. We couldn't try hats or clothes on. But when I got grown, I could try them on. They changed and let us try them, but still they wouldn't hire you to work. When the hub was going strong, I'm talking in the past now, they did hire one black woman, a cousin of mine. Her husband had died. She lived in Lexington. Her husband died. Her name was Wadey. And so she came to Danville and moved in with me and my mother. And she got a job, was the first black I knew that run the elevator. And then after she got sick, she worked there for a few years with us. And then she passed away, got sick and passed away. And then they hired Bunny Davis's wife, Miss Lee Davis. They hired her as an elevator operator. And Miss Lee Davis worked there, elevator, for many, many years. And then they let her come out on the floor. She's the first one I know of at the hub that got to come out on the floor and sell clothes and hats and things. And one time up on Main Street here in Danville, upstairs, there was Kentucky Candies. Well, upstairs, over the 10-cent store, which they wouldn't hire us in 10-dime stores either. We couldn't work only in maintenance. But upstairs at one time was they called it Kentucky Candies. And they hired several black women up there to make the candy and wrap the candy. They had about 10 or 12 black women that worked up there. But things got better, a little bit better, but still it was segregated. And then the government built a hospital for the soldiers, wounded soldiers, out there on Bergen Road. And they hired a bunch of black people out there working in the kitchen and dining room. They got a lot of men here got in the kitchen as chefs and cooks and stuff like that. And then they started having nursing school out there. And several of the women here went out there and took nursing. And then later on, they started hiring them down to East McDowell, but that was years later that they started hiring them as nurse. I worked for Corning for almost 40 years myself, and I retired from there, and it was Phillips Lighting when I retired. And they treated me very well. Of course, when I was first hired, they never had hired no black person on the floor. Only black people. The Nichols man that was uptown, they had meetings. We had a hotel on Main Street at one time called Gilter Hotel, and they didn't have anybody in the hotel working but maids that cleaned the rooms. And the maid that was there at the time, she got in with the people that came from New York to build Corning. And she told me herself, she said she heard them in a meeting at the Gilter Hotel down there on Main Street and told Corning from New York that they could come in here and build a factory, but they could not hire no black people. That's what he said, black people in production, but you could hire them in maintenance. And that's what they done. That's the only thing they had at that time. Back in 1959 or 58 or somewhere along there, that's when I came along, and I got an application from one of the workers and turned it in, and they hired me. That's how I got in. And then at the railroad station now, all my growing up years that I can remember, my grandfather, which is a big thing, he was a porter on the train, and he wasn't here that often. They'd come through here every other day. He ran from Cincinnati to Chattanooga. We'd have to take him his lunch out to the station and have his lunch on the train. Now, he was a porter, but he couldn't work his way up to a conductor. Only white people could be the conductors. The black men was porters, which was a big thing then. And they finally got in a union. And that was like this for years and years and years. You'd go out to the railroad station here, which railroad trains was a big thing then. That's the only way with buses and trains. It's the only way you could travel unless you had a car. Mm-hmm. And we'd go out there and meet him, and one station said colored. Over here it was white. I better not go in that door over there, and I better not drink out of that water fountain. So, you come on in here and sit down and wait till he come in, from all his run. Uh-huh. My grandmother back in the day, when we'd have to go out to the railroad track to take my grandfather his lunch, and she had a T-Model Ford. And she was kind of a slow person, and she'd wait till the last minute and she'd rush and get his lunch together. And then we'd go out across town in a T-Model Ford just flying, trying to catch that train.
She'll slow like mentally, so she'll be procrastinating.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Uh-huh. She loved out in the yard working in flyers and stuff. And she'd stay out there and working in flyers, and then she'd come in and every night we'd be just barely getting there before the train pulled in, trying to give him his lunch. Uh-huh. Yeah, they had a black and white waiting room out there at the railroad track. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of black men worked in the yard out to the railroad track. But he happened to be a porter. And every now and then he'd bring his white porter home with him. Okay. And he'd stay a day or two and they'd go on back on the train again. At that time, I was brought up by 4 strong women. My father died when I was 10 years old. And my mother raised me by herself. But I had 2 grandmothers, 2 strong grandmothers, and they talked to you all the time about things in life and things like that. And I learned a lot from them. And later on, I married my mother-in-law. She was in my life, and she was awful good to me, too. She's the one that finished Kentucky State at one time. When you only had to have 2 years, she finished Kentucky State, like I told you, and then went back to Madam C.J. Walker's in Louisville for hair. And then she had it opened up. She was in the shop like that building I showed you. She had a shop upstairs on 2nd Street for a long, long time. And then her father built her on their house on the porch. He made a shop for her. And she worked in the shop, I guess, almost 50 years, I guess. But we didn't have to worry about anything. Black people in Danville then was more compassionate towards one another. We kept up with each other's children. And at Bates School, they would have plays. And we'd all go up there, everybody's child, because you'd go see that child in the play and all that kind of stuff. And we had concerts, musical concerts. And like now, you hear the Hallelujah chorus. Miss Margaret Andrews, she taught us that back in the day. That's that chorus like, hallelujah. Hallelujah. Okay, well, we learned that Miss Margaret taught that to us years and years ago. It's beautiful, beautiful. And she was up on everything. In music, I mean. Yeah.
Are there, you mentioned your days at school and you went to Bate High School. Are there any teachers that stick out in your mind, like as people who kind of molded you into who you are?
They all were.
All of them?
All of them. All those black teachers, they cared about the people. I mean, children, us children. Yeah, all of them. I thank all of them all the time because they were so good to us. They wanted you to learn. And if you didn't understand, you could ask them and they'd sit down with you and explain to you. And then we had Bible. And once or twice a week, we had Bible. And then every day when you go to school, you're going to get up, one person, she called on anybody to get up and read a verse out of the Bible. And then you say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And that's got a lot to do with your growing up. It's your foundation. Mm-hmm. And you better not let that flag touch that ground, or she'll get you. And then we had the white lady, a Caucasian, whatever. Miss Hudson would come and teach us Bible, and she was a good teacher, and she was good to us too. Mm-hmm. That's all we done, go to school, church, and movies. Then later on, as I got to be a teenager, then they had the Hollywood down on South 2nd Street, way down, like going down towards Batewood Homes. Mm-hmm. They had a place, a joint called Hollywood. We go down there and, we'd dance and have a good time down there as teenagers. Then on further down, like a red barn, they call it Swingland. And that's where Ray Charles came. B.B. King came. They just started now. Mm-hmm. See, they'd come here. They'd come to Lebanon. I can tell you terms in Lebanon. But we had things going on. And then up to the church, my Aunt Maud, my grandmother Gertrude Jones, they had teas down in the basement of church. And you go up there for teas, stuff like that. And a lot of times we didn't have television. That wasn't even heard of. But then on Sundays, a lot of times the churches out in the rural areas, they would have something they'd call rallies. It was like a homecoming. And people that used to live there and gone to get jobs, because they couldn't get jobs here, they would come back that Sunday. So we'd make our way to that church and stay all day long, eat and talk, and then they'd have preaching and stuff like that. That's when I was young. But the church, First Baptist Church, has always been full of people. We always had a lot of members. And St. James always had a lot of members down in St. James, all black. And they was both wonderful. And the Christian church, now my grandfather, he was Christian. And when he'd come off the railroad, a lot of times I would go to church with him, over to the Christian church. And I remember one time we had a hay ride. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. I've been on a few.
You've been on a few? Yeah. Well, we had them back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah, we had hay right there. We go ride a hay ride, go up Junction City, up to Mr. Bertha Logan's house. He lived up in Junction. And we'd get on that hay ride, on that wagon, go up to his house and turn around and go to the airport and go see the airport up there and then come on back on the hay ride. We did that. We was always doing stuff. We made our own fun. And then we would play Chinese checkers. We'd play, different games, old maids and dominoes. And we played games and stuff like it, And then in the summertime, I think I might have mentioned this before, but like in the summertime when school was out, they had something they called playground. And that playground up there, there was a lady, her name was Mrs. Viola Hughes, I believe it was. She was going away to college, to Knoxville College. And she would come in the summertime, and she would be over the playground. And all us young people, we all would go up to the playground. And at the playground, you had like badminton, and you had tennis, and you had sandboxes for the little kids. And horseshoe, croquet. You don't even hear nothing about no croquet and horseshoe and all that stuff no more. You know you don't.
I've played some horseshoes before.
You have? You was little?
No. I was probably in middle school.
Okay.
I would say we were at my aunt and uncle's house, and they had a horseshoe pit in their backyard. So we toss them every now and then.
Oh,
at,
yeah.
Like 4th of July cookouts, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, we didn't have cornhole then. That's a new thing to me. We didn't have that, but we had all that other stuff. And I'd get mad if I ended up being the old maid. I'd get mad and throw the cards and all that because I was called the old maid. I was a kid, you know. I laugh about that now.
Was there a time that you like realized how you were being treated because of the color of your skin, like that was wrong and it had to change?
Yeah, I knew it. Well, what you gonna say? You can't say, you know, I couldn't fight the battle by myself. I just had to go on and do what the sign said. They said don't drink out of this fountain. You know, I just didn't pay any attention. I'd go on. I didn't let it bother me. And we didn't know any better. We didn't know any better. When I was with my mother, that house where I was brought up in had belonged to my great-grandparents. And they had bought it back in the 1800s. And I still owned the house until about 2 years ago I sold it. I had to sell it. It's too expensive. But then I found out later on, up there on Wilderness Road, they have made it historical neighborhood now. So I don't know what's going to come of it now, but that house was my great-grandparents' house. There was a lady here by the name, I got a picture, she's on one of these pictures. Her name was Sadie Turner, and she was interested in young people. She had a beauty shop over on Green Street then. Now it's Martin Luther King now.
Okay.
But she had a beauty shop over there, and she was interested in young people. So what she done was she went to the city and asked them to block off at the corner of 2nd Street and 1st Street. That was a block. And then we had a funeral home. Smith Jackson had a funeral home in that area too. And they also had a shop name called You Name It Shop, where they sold those 45 records. That's what we played then. And they sold magazines and papers and books and stuff. We had that, funeral home, and then she had the city to use those, what do you call them, horses, those yellow things, block that street off. And then in the summertime at night, we'd go up and skate. We'd go up and have the best old time up at night skating. And then we owned a tall building down there. I got a picture of it in there too, in my bag here. And that belonged to the African Americans. And there's about 3 floors. And she fixed it so that we could have a youth center in there. So we'd go up there and dance and have a good time, young people up there. And she'd have record players and stuff going, and we'd go up there. And then there was a used furniture place downstairs, but the whole building belonged to African Americans. And then we had up there, like I told you, I had that picture too. It's up on 2nd Street, where I told you, where they had the beauty shops up there, and then where they had on Sundays, they'd have ice cream and stuff. You go up there. We always had something to do. But when you come out from your neighborhood and come up on Main Street, then you had to stand back. And if you wanted a Coke or hamburger, you had to stand there, and you couldn't sit down. Even in the 60s, they weren't able to sit down. That's why you see all this marching and going on, because they know we've been mistreated. Everywhere we went was signs colored only and white only. You just accepted it. That's the only thing you could do, because we didn't have a John Lewis and Martin Luther King, and we didn't have them up here to help us, you know. But they was down there.
They were working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, I don't ever remember when we couldn't vote. I remember my grandmother and mother and them, they would go vote. I don't think it could have been probably before my time they could. But during my time, we could vote. I wasn't old enough, but my mother and them, they voted.
Did you ever get involved during the civil rights movement? Or?
No, I never did. We never did have anything like that up here until now. I noticed you got 2 strong women, Cheryl and the little Withers girl. Now they strong. I'm proud of them coming forward, because I guess you'd say it was kind of, cowed down or whatever you want to call it, but we didn't speak like these 2 girls, and I'm proud of them doing that. You can't even imagine the things that I'm telling you, can you?
Some of it, but I mean, it's all through books and studies and stuff.
I lived it.
So what was it like going from not being able to sit with white people or drink from the same water fountains or eat at the same restaurants to seeing a black president, like for you?
He's still my president. Barack is still my president. He's still my president, because I think he loved all people. Didn't make no difference.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the president now?
Don't ask me that.
Don't ask you that. All right, that's fair. Fair enough.
Because you don't want to hear what I'm going to say.
Well, I mean,
I'm not going to say
You're
it.
not gonna say it.
No, you probably can't put it on tape, what I'd say.
We'll say no more.
No, don't say no more. Just leave that alone.
Okay. Yes. Ma'am.
Yeah, leave it alone.
You mentioned your husband before. Can you tell us a little bit about him? How'd you guys meet?
Well, we was in the same class, and he was her father. We was in the same class, went all the way through together, and then he went off to service, and I went with him. We lived down in Alabama for a while. He was at, I believe it was Camp Rucker. We lived down there in Dalton, Alabama. That's where we were. And we go to movies down in Alabama. You go downtown, and we'd have to go around the back to go to the movie, and then go upstairs in the attic down in Alabama. So we just did what we had to do until his time was up, you know. And then when he got his papers to go to Korea, that's when I came home, and he went on to Korea. But later on in life, when he got out of the Army and he went back to Kentucky State and went down there and stayed down there for a while. But things didn't work out between me and him. It seemed like after he got out of the service, and we got a divorce. But then he moved to Chicago, and that was where he was from anyway. And so he passed away in Chicago.
Was there a big difference between living in Kentucky and then living in Alabama?
Yeah, to me it was. And we had to go, like I said, when we went to theater down there, you had to go around the back and then go upstairs. We could go through the front door here in Danville. but you know what I'm saying.
Right. Is there anything else that kind of stood out to you?
From Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to get away from down there. Then, but now I guess I could live down there now. No, I wouldn't want to live down there. But I guess it's much better now than it was then.
Did you ever remarry?
Yeah, I did. And then I divorced. I made one mistake and then turned around and made another. Same one. I had to laugh myself. My advice to a young person is stay in school, go on to college, get your degree, and get as much education as you can get, and stay in church. And that's where your foundation is, at your church. That's what my advice is. Stay in school and be good to your family and raise your children and teach them the same thing. That's what I was taught. Well, when you got on Greyhound bus station, and Greyhounds was popular then. And you go on somewhere on the bus, you know to go straight to the very back. Went straight to the back. I've done that many times.
What'd you think when Rosa Parks did it?
See, she got up.
How did that impact you? What you
She was brave. See, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have had that much nerve. But she was brave. They are heroes. She and John Lewis, they are heroes to me. There was a man here by the name of Cecil Cohen, and back in the day, he was on the city council. And I admired him, and I looked up to him because he would go to the meetings, city commissioner meetings, but he would also come back to church on Sundays and tell us what was going on in the cities. And that's how we knew what was going on in the cities, because me and my mom, we didn't even take a newspaper. So, but we always was at church. And Cecil would tell us what was going on, you know, in church. I mean, in the city. That's how we knew, through him.
Okay.
Other than that, we wouldn't know.
What do you imagine heaven will be like?
Oh, it's going to be wonderful. Streets of gold. And be face to face with Jesus Christ. It'll be wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. I was taught that you treat everyone with respect and with love. And you treat them like you want to be treated. And it'll go a long way. You know what I mean? That hate, that don't make no sense. We just passing through here. That's all, we're passing through. So you got to treat everybody right, not hate, love everyone. Even the ones that mistreat you, you got to love them anyway and pray for them. Because whatever they've done to you, it'll come back to them, full circle. So that's what I was taught, and that's what I try to practice. And I do pretty good. I try to get along with everybody. We just had to pray. We had to pray that our country gets better. I think God's trying to tell us something, and we all have to pray, talk to the Lord about it, and ask Him to straighten things out. I hope for the future that this virus, number one, that this virus moves on out and that it never comes back. And I hope that everybody can get along since we're on this planet and earth together, and everybody go to church and treat your family with respect. That's what I hope for the future.
Gotta stay strong.